I received two emails this morning from viewers, maybe the two of you are watching, who expressed disappointment in me and in my take on Donald Trump and the insurrection at the Capitol and whether or not to impeach him. I want to read a little bit of these emails and then I want to respond to them. This one came from David. I'm not going to say his full name. David says, Trump accountability is the subject. He says, I was very disappointed to hear your opposition to Trump's impeachment. Do you really think it is okay to let him off without any accountability for inciting the insurrection? I think bringing people to account for their criminal behavior is essential unless you don't care if it's likely to happen again. I find the whole idea that we need to close our eyes to past abuses disgusting. Would you also agree with Obama that we need to look forward and not backward and let torturers walk free? Thanks to him, torture is still on the shelf for any president to use in the future. Similarly, by your thinking, insurrection will now be established as acceptable behavior without having to worry about any repercussions. I also don't buy the idea that pandemic relief won't happen because of impeachment proceedings, as if the Senate will be incapable of doing anything else. That is a pretty feeble argument. Thank you, David, for your email. First of all, I'm going to say this again and again until I'm blue in the face. Many on the Democratic side of the aisle, Kamala Harris famously laughs and giggles and says, we can chew gum, and walk at the same time, saying we can do two things at once. But historically, they have never done two things at once, ever. It's just never happened. So when they can stop going after Donald Trump and actually pass bills that are good for the American people, when they can do both of those things, I'll believe that. But in 4 years, they never have. And they never did before that. And they aren't going to now. So I don't believe that Democrats are suddenly going to be able to do both things. Not in Congress. They're just not going to be doing that. And they haven't. So that is a misnomer. Everybody, I hear this one all the time from people. They're always saying we can do both. When I say don't, stop going after all of this, thinking that racism is the big plague against America right now. It isn't. We have economic problems that are causing anger and anxiety. And when you solve those economic problems, when people are happy and they're able to pay their bills and feed their families, they don't resort to extremism of any kind. They're happy. They just want to take their families to the Grand Canyon on a vacation or to Yellowstone or to Times Square. That's it. That's what they want to do. They want to go to Florida. They want to go to Disney World. That is what people want to do in their spare time. They don't want to get angry and hide away on 8chan in their basements. That's not what they do. So, we have to focus our energy on actually fixing the fact that the middle class dream in America has dwindled away to nearly nothing. And our politicians are actually incapable of pointing the finger at each other, blaming each other all the time, and passing actual legislation that means anything. They are actually incapable of doing that. Another email, and then I'll respond fully here. It says, this is from Barry. And Barry says, hi, Kim. I am emailing you in regard to your video titled Rand Paul Forces GOP Senators to Admit who is voting for impeachment, dated January 27th. I often watch or listen to your videos and regard you as somewhat intelligent. However, I am somewhat disappointed with you on your position on the Trump impeachment hearings. It sounds like you want to turn a blind eye to Donald Trump's erratic behavior and not hold him accountable for the consequences of his actions. And he says, and it goes on to say, I'm an independent. I did not vote I'm not a DNC bootlicker by any means. I voted for Howie Hawkins. So he's saying, look, but I still think what Trump did was really bad. So here's the thing. Do we have any evidence that Trump colluded with any of these individuals who broke into the Capitol? Do we have any evidence that he actually had contact with them or that he was helping them plan this insurrection whatsoever? Because I'm under the impression that he just wanted protesters to show up to Capitol Hill to pressure Mike Pence into doing the right thing, right? He says, I want you to go there. You're going to protest and you're going to do the right, protesting Mike Pence or Congress to do the right thing. And that is what he called for. And he never called for any violence or any takeover in any way. Now, was he questioning the election? Yes, he was questioning the election. And was he encouraging protesters to put political pressure on whoever the protest was intended at? Yes, he did do that. But that is what protests are. Protests are meant to demand change. Most of the time, no change is made, by the way, but protests go on, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to demand some kind of political change. And oftentimes, protests result in some violence. That's not okay, but it happens a lot. And so we don't typically hold protest organizers accountable for the violence that maybe some people participate in at the protest unless the organizer organized the violence. That is when we say, okay, you're held accountable, right? But we don't say you are held accountable because you organized a protest. That's fundamentally anti what a democracy is all about. But here's the thing. Being a democracy, a big part of being a democracy is the ability to question our government, the ability to challenge authority, the ability to say, I don't agree with you, I don't believe you, and I'm going to voice my concerns, and I'm even going to do it in a protest. I'm going to show up on your lawn, I'm going to have signs, and we're going to shout and chant, and that is what we're going to do in order to show to you that we do not agree. That is part of being a democratic society, is this ability to challenge our government. So if Donald Trump is not above the law, and I agree he's not above the law, presidents are not above the law. If Donald Trump committed a crime, he needs to be charged with that crime and tried in a court of law. That is what needs to happen. He is not above the law, but he's also not subject to extra laws that the rest of us are not subject to. And so to say that Donald Trump is somehow now responsible because he called for a protest or even organized the protest, which I don't believe he organized it, but I don't think they're even claiming that. But let's say he did. Even if he organized the protest, and he said, let's demand change and let's march onto that Capitol lawn and let's demand that Mike Pence do the right thing. And being able to do that is part of being a democratic society. That's the point. In other societies that we criticize, dictatorships, they're not allowed to do that. Their population is not allowed to question authority. When they're told the election is over, that the dictator got all the votes, 100% of them, like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, he got all the votes. He gets all of them every single time. When that happens, the population is not allowed to question that narrative. They're not allowed to say, Kim Jong-un really got 100% of the votes, seriously? They're not allowed to say, you mean just one person didn't vote for that guy? That's not allowed in a dictatorship. But we don't live in a dictatorship. And the last I checked, we're trying to avoid that, actually. That's what they were trying to scream about for the last 4 years. They were saying that they didn't want to live in a dictatorship. All these people said Trump was going to usher in this dictatorship. And, now what we're seeing instead is these sort of inchings towards the likes of a dictatorship when we tell people they're not allowed to question elections. When we say you're not allowed to show up on the Capitol lawn and pressure political leaders, that you're not allowed to demand change or to be or to say the words fight or to say the words push or to say the words demand. You're not allowed to say those words. You're not really even allowed to protest anymore because they put barbed wire around the Capitol building. That looks like a dictatorship, not a democracy. So whether or not, look, it's totally irrelevant whether or not I agree or disagree with Donald Trump and his calls, his accusations against the government. If he's accusing authorities of rigging elections, if he's accusing election authorities of stealing elections from him and whatever it is he's accusing them of, he is allowed by virtue of being an American citizen, even as president of the United States, to say that. That is part of being a democratic society. So it's irrelevant whether or not I agree with him. What matters is I agree with the ability to do that. And I agree that if violence happens, which oftentimes in protests it does, that the person who organized the protest should not be held accountable for that, because that would have a chilling effect on all protests. Every Black Lives, I shouldn't say every, because that's not true at all, but many, I would say, of the Black Lives Matter protests did have some violence break out, even if it was real small. A lot of them, the violence was real minor. the vast majority, it was incredibly peaceful. Some of the protests, the violence wasn't so minor. It was much bigger, and we saw it. We saw looting and smashing of windows and whatnot. But typically at every protest, there's a reason why there's police there, because there's usually somebody who does something to somebody. And it might be small, it might be quick, it might be an incident that doesn't ever make the news, but usually something like that happens. And that doesn't go back on the organizer of the event. We don't then go to the Black Lives Matter organizers and say, you're at fault for the violence that happens at your events. And so therefore you can no longer have these protests. And in fact, you're going to be deplatformed and silenced, and you're going to be held accountable for the violence that happens at these events that you organized. And because you said fight and demand and push for change, you used fighting words, you used violence, and therefore you are now held accountable because this guy actually did go and push a cop. And you said push for change. So you're accountable. That isn't a democratic society. So if he had committed a crime, he would be charged with a crime. And I personally believe that impeachment of a president should be at that standard. The bar needs to be raised. What happened against Bill Clinton and what happened against Trump twice, I believe those impeachments were totally and completely purely political. Sure, could they find a little, can they catch you in anything? I'm sure they can. I'm sure they could all catch us in something that we've all done that was illegal. They'll get us for speeding. You sped that one time. You've broken the law. You're a criminal. They could get anybody for anything at any time because not everybody, I don't think anybody follows all the rules all the time. And so these impeachment proceedings, both of them against Clinton and against Trump, to me were so political and so partisan and so just totally against what the process of impeachment is supposed to be about, that the bar needs to be raised. And that bar needs to be criminal activity. These presidents need to have committed crimes against us, actual crimes, in order for them to be impeached. Because at this point now, the precedent has been set. And now we're going to see all these politicians impeached left and right just for the hell of it, just for political partisan reasons. And I think that's a dangerous road to go down for our democracy, not political leaders who demand change or say that the government is corrupted or things have been rigged. There's plenty of political leaders I want to actually say those things. I've been demanding that they do, and they don't, and I get mad about it. So I'm not going to blame anybody on any side that decides to do the very thing that I want some people on my side to actually do. Because that's what a democracy is. That's what a democratic society is all about. So that hopefully that clears up, why I am not in favor of these impeachment proceedings, why I'm not in favor of holding Trump accountable when I think all of that will backfire on anyone who wants to protest and demand and push and fight for change in this country.